Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our post-budget roundtable with Ontario's Finance Minister, the Honourable Rod Phillips. We're delighted to welcome the Minister and you to this very timely event. The latest provincial budget was released just 5 days ago. We're very grateful to MPP Michael Parsa, the Parliamentary Assistant to the President of the Treasury Board, and to MPP Daisy Y, the Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister for Seniors and Accessibility. Their good work on behalf of our community, I'm sure, has a lot to do with the Minister being available to us this afternoon. First, I'd like to ask Daisy to say a few words of welcome, if she would.
Thank you very much, Karen. And first of all, I would like to say thank you, Minister Rod Phillips, and thank you, my good caucus members and colleagues at PA Michael Parsa, for organizing this as well. And we're so happy that we can discuss this important topic and the budget with all of you. I will leave the important stuff for our minister to deliver, but I just want to say that we understand COVID-19 and this pandemic will be and may be with us for a little while. So let's just do our best to tackle it. Plus, at the same time, let's stay positive. I'm so happy that one of the items that we support our small business is in Ontario Together, that we're helping our businesses to retool themselves as we go through this tough time, as well as for the small businesses, we are giving them the relief for their PPE. I don't want to go too far into it because I have everything for our minister to deliver it to you, especially for our small businesses here. I just want to say thank you, everyone. Let's work on it together. Let's encourage each other, and let's be positive with, even though we're having a tough time. Thank you very much, Karen, for organizing this for us.
Thank you so much, Daisy. Michael Parsa, we really appreciate the work done by you and your staff to bring Minister Phillips to Richmond Hill for this. Would you be kind enough to say a few words as well?
Delighted to. Thanks very much, Karen. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much for introducing both Daisy and I, and for truly organizing another great event. I have to tell you, like, your dedication, your hard work on behalf of the Richmond Hill business community is appreciated by all of us, which is always a pleasure to join you at these roundtables to hear the great discussions that undoubtedly are going to take place in the next hour and a half. I also want to thank your board members of the Chamber of the Board of Trade in Richmond Hill. Thanks so much for the work you're doing. And of course, the Chair, Rod Johnson. Thank you for your leadership, Rod, and the advocacy on behalf of all the businesses and the business community in our city. And it's always a pleasure to have my colleague, Daisy Way, hardworking MPP for Richmond Hill. And I see that we have his Worship Mayor David Barrow joining us, as well as Councillors David West and Councillor Godwin Chen. I hope I'm not missing anybody. I'm looking at the screen. Those are the only two that I'm seeing. And I also want to thank, and quite frankly, not least, but I want to thank my friend and colleague, the Minister of Finance, the Honourable Rod Phillips, for joining us, and welcome him back to Richmond Hill virtually once again. As many of you know, last week, Minister Phillips introduced the next phase in our government's response to COVID-19, which is Ontario's action plan to protect, support, and recover. It's a 3-pillar action plan. This 3-year, $45 billion budget not only responds to the serious health concerns, but it also addresses the economic impacts caused by COVID-19. I have to say, Minister, I want to thank you for all your hard work, the tireless efforts on behalf of all Ontarians. It's truly remarkable. And it was evident, in the budget that you tabled last week, which showed our government's commitment to do whatever it takes to protect Ontarians. So on behalf of all the residents of Richmond Hill, and I have the honor of representing two great town and a city, I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing and for always being available to listen to the residents of Richmond Hill, our voices and our concerns. Thank you and welcome again to Richmond Hill.
Thank you. Great. Well, listen, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Daisy. I should say that You know, when we look at this budget, one of the things I think we'll probably talk about a little bit, and I'll spend most of my time with questions. I won't go on too long because I find the questions are most useful for everybody. But one of the things I'm sure we're going to talk about is the significant steps for seniors, for our elders, and Daisy, working with our colleague Minister Cho, Raymond Cho, has really, I think, responsible for something that's very responsive, I think, to that very important group of people. And Michael sits. This is a bit of a secret. Don't tell anybody this, but Treasury Board, of course, is a cabinet committee where only cabinet ministers are supposed to sit. But Michael actually elbowed his way in there, and now we won't let him leave because he sits around that principal table where we fundamentally look at the dollars and cents and make sure they get spent well. So it's a great pleasure to be with him. Councillors, Mr. Mayor, thank you for taking the time. I know how busy your worlds are, and thank you so much, particularly to the mayor. You know, I was with one of our great GTA mayors, Mayor Tory, today, making an announcement. We have been just so fortunate as a provincial government to have the partnership we have. And it, you know, I said in my speech last Thursday, you know, we have really something special in Canada, in Ontario, about the way we do things. And I think maybe the way the rest of the world has gone through some of this has reminded us of that. I've never had so many people say how happy they are to be a Canadian, but I really think it has to do, you know, we look out for each other, we care for each other. We don't always agree. In fact, we can disagree quite strongly on things, but at the end of the day, you know, people have worked together. Certainly levels of government have worked together, but also communities like Richmond Hill have worked together. And it's that civil society that really is the difference, I think, because we're still not through this. It goes without saying that we are, you know, in the second wave. We have seen cases rising. I'd be happy to talk about the current status of that as well, in addition to the budget. I know that's primarily where we're here, but I know that's a lot of what people are interested in. I just came from a cabinet meeting where we were discussing some of the actions that are being taken, and I think very rightfully so, under the advice of our public health officials, to make sure that we are, you know, doing the right thing and protecting people here and in the province. But we are working through this together. We are much better prepared, certainly, than we were at the outset of this challenge. The plan that we laid out last week, really the first multi-year budget, Quebec's going to do theirs, I think, at the end of the week. But we wanted to start to lay out into the future where we saw things going. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. But as Michael pointed out, we really put it under three pillars. Protect, which represents about $15 billion worth of really money being spent in healthcare and in other areas of support. But I think about $8.3 billion more than last year, 2.5 just for the hospitals alone. Very necessary money through a pandemic and should be spent. Another significant amount in the neighborhood of 24 million that's really around supporting communities. That includes the work that we did with the federal government to help make sure that communities like Richmond Hill and others had support, you know, where they saw revenues drop and other things happen as a result of the pandemic, to try to reach out and in partnership with Mayor Barrow and the other mayors working together to provide that kind of support, but also some really critical supports for individuals that are needed. And then the recover part, which I know this group will likely be interested in, which are a lot of the steps we've been taking to start to lay the groundwork now for recovering. It may seem a little bit ambitious to be talking about recovery when we're in the middle of a second wave, but in my mind, we can't start too soon. That's why we took some of the steps that we took to support businesses, particularly small businesses, and to be looking to the future about how we make sure, yes, we provide the direct support that's needed in terms of for today, for our main streets and for our communities, but we also start to think about positioning ourselves for the future. There's just some very I believe, when we come through this, some very exciting opportunities for Ontario on the other side of this, in large measure because of the way we've handled this, because people are working together, because of some of the things we understand a little better, perhaps, about the challenges that parts of our communities face, because of having to go through the challenge that something like COVID-19 puts you through. So I'm really excited about the future. I'm really looking forward to the next bit of time we have to talk together. And Karen, I'll turn it back over to you. As always, thank you for pulling this together. Rod, appreciate your leadership as well. But Karen, I know you put these things together, not with a lot of notice, and you get a great crowd. And I always learn a lot when I get a chance to come to Richmond Hill, even virtually. So thank you for that, and look forward to the questions.
Thank you so much. That's great. You know, the nature of this event is we want to make sure that we get as many questions in as we can, because we're so lucky to have you for this hour or so. One of the things I would like to do, you did mention the importance of what the budget is doing for municipalities. I would like to, well, the bulk of the questions will be coming through me. They've been submitted already, and I'll be reading them and asking you to answer our members' questions. But I would ask Mayor Barrow to just say a few words, if he would. And if he has a question that has been burning a hole in his pocket, this might be the moment for him to ask it. Otherwise, we will continue with the subject at hand. Mayor Barrow.
Thank you very much, and it's happy to see everyone here. And I will, on behalf of the City of Richmond Hill, like to extend a formal welcome to Ontario's Minister of Finance. Thank you very much, sir, and a strong supporter of the business community. And we're strong with you on moving forward in the business communities as we work together, as you said. We're pleased to getting the details of the plan that you had and understand the major impact that it may or be helpful to our community. Or these details were outlined in the budget certainly last week, but there's a lot of initiatives that I've found encouraging, certainly, and looking forward to hearing more about in today's meeting. So with that, I'll just turn everything back to Karen. Once again, I don't have a question yet, but I'm sure I will.
There's still time. There's still time.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I will just remind everyone, if you do have a question to submit, please use the chat function, and we'll do our very best to make sure it gets answered. With that, if it's okay, Minister, we'll get started with the questions that have come in. The first one, the Ontario unemployment rate is currently a little over 12%. What are the government's longer term plans to address the disappearance of so many jobs?
Well, you know, we've seen some good progress in terms of reply and response to from an employment perspective, but we also have to remember we were at historic levels of employment and low unemployment levels previously. We returned about 30,000 more jobs. I think we are currently, and I don't want to be wrong about this, but we're at about 95% of the employment that we were at prior to the pandemic. But underneath that is some real suffering for some people in our community. So while we've seen some areas bounce back quite strongly, whether it's real estate, manufacturing, we actually have more people employed in manufacturing now than we had before the pandemic, which is interesting. Logistics, transportation. But when it comes to what I think of as the high touch businesses, the tactile businesses, the Main Street retail, tourism, hospitality, these industries, not just here, but across the globe, have been hit very, very hard. So one of the things, so really that is at the foundation of why we put the recover component into that protect, support, recover of last week's budget, with some real direct supports. When it comes to our tourism businesses, we want to make 2021 the year of the Ontario staycation. So of course, when it's safe to do so, and we'll have to have our public health people help with that, but we're going to provide the most generous travel tax credit for Ontario residents in Ontario. So a 20% tax credit back on your travel expenses to get people out and traveling, really support our neighbors and friends who are in those tourism businesses. Also, I think, quite frankly, we can all probably use a vacation, and what better place to do it than in Ontario. When it comes to looking both now into the future, we've reduced significantly a portion of the property tax that the mayor and the councillors will be familiar with, which is the education property tax rate. And that has an impact, particularly for the industrial side in Richmond Hill, a little less for the commercial because your rates were already relatively low, but this was a relatively random rate that was quite high across many areas. It's going to be about $450 million of tax reductions immediately for businesses. We're also inviting municipalities where they think it's a good idea to create a small business tax rate where we will match that rate, that lower rate as well. When it comes to the individuals who are out of work, we are focusing our training, about 181 million of new training dollars around those sectors where people have been affected, whether that's tourism or hospitality, making sure that we look to micro skilling programs and other things to bring some of those people into some of the areas where we have skilled shortages. I was yesterday at an announcement with the Premier where we still have significant skills shortages in the trades. And we have a lot of construction, a lot of building, a lot of infrastructure. The biggest infrastructure program in the history of the province, focused on transit, and now also focused on broadband, because we've also made a significant commitment to spreading broadband connectivity across Ontario. So we need the skilled trades, and we want to take those folks that are displaced right now and move them into those trades. On a more short-term basis, we announced yesterday significant hiring for contact tracers. Again, looking out of the hospitality industry, where we have people who are underemployed or aren't employed right now, where we need people to be on those phones, helping to do the contact tracing. So there's a number of initiatives. We're reducing electricity rates across the province, very significant move. This was one of the major competitive disadvantages for our manufacturing and larger commercial businesses. So reducing electricity rates by an average of 15%, all of this starting January 1. And the reason we're doing this now is we want to give the assistance to our job creators, but we also want to show them the trajectory for the future. We want them to be here and be thinking, because I was a business person before I got into this, and one great thing I know about business people and entrepreneurs is they're inherently optimistic. And so they need to see that we're not doing things just for now, but we're doing them for the future. And that's why we want to see that they want them to see these advantages and know that they're going to continue. So Karen, that's a high level answer, but lots of great programming on the training side, lots of good support for businesses, and particularly focusing on those industries and individuals who've been affected by COVID.
Thank you. Oh, good. I'm not muted. Good for me. I wonder if you can talk a bit about the change to the employer health tax. That's one budget measure that will have a direct impact on many small businesses.
Right. So it's interesting when we looked at the measures that we wanted to take to help immediately, and we looked at taxes, because certainly businesses have been really clear to us about wanting us to continue to reduce the costs of them doing business. Things like property tax and things like the employer health tax are what they call in economic world in the Ministry of Finance here, profit insensitive taxes, which means it doesn't matter whether you make money or not, you got to pay the tax. And a particularly pernicious tax are those taxes that actually are taxes on employees. The higher your payroll goes, the more people you employ, the more tax the government charges you. Well, if there was ever time not to have that tax, it would be during a recession when we're trying to have people get hired. So we had set an exemption for the employer health tax during the first wave of the pandemic, where we raised the exemption to $1 million from $450,000, essentially meaning that if your payroll goes up to $1 million for the last year, you haven't had to pay any tax to keep people employed or to hire new people. And of course, that's what we want you to do. This was so popular that we decided to make it permanent. So that means that for all payroll up to $1 million, there's no employer health tax. Also, for those companies with payrolls over $1 million, they won't pay any of that payroll tax up to $1 million. Again, this is something we heard from employers has kept people on the job, and we want to send the signal to our job creators, to our entrepreneurs, that we're going to make it easier for you to be successful here in Ontario. So those profit insensitive taxes, property tax, employer health tax, those were our focus this time, and it means immediate relief. In that case, about $385 million. About 30,000 companies in Ontario will no longer pay that tax, and that's good for employers. And I know many successful growing businesses in Richmond Hill will benefit from it.
Thank you. The nature of doing business seems to be facing a permanent shift to remote work outside traditional workplaces, except of course for manufacturing and a lot of the services, but certainly the nature of office work is looking at a fairly permanent shift. What are we doing as a province to prepare for that change to the marketplace?
Well, it's been very interesting to see with COVID the changes that have happened as far as the way work has been done, and I think all of us are wondering, well, how much of that is going to stay the same in the future? But the thing that we know we've learned is the importance of connectivity. So this is why we've made a major investment in broadband, and this is something I was very pleased, and I'll always give credit where credit is due. The federal government came along. We were poking them a little bit last week because they made some promises about broadband. They made announcements this week. So Ontario's put forward $1 billion. That's the most money by any province now, an additional $680 million in this budget to really stretch our broadband capacity. It's the infrastructure of the 21st century. And it's remarkable the places where broadband and good broadband connectivity doesn't exist. You would think in my riding of Ajax, it's a fairly suburban area, that you would have good broadband across a relatively small suburban riding. You don't. right? And I know that there's gaps in the system throughout our community. And these gaps now mean that you have added challenges with your children's education if they're getting it from home. You have added challenges getting your healthcare, because now we have access in a way that we didn't before to doctors and nurses and health professionals online, but you need to be connected. Can you guys hang up? I think this might be a friend of ours who just wanted to say hello. Hello. Oh, Premier, I'm glad you could call. Do you mind saying a few words to the folks here in Richmond Hill?
Excellent.
Hey, you've got the Richmond Hill Chamber. We got Daisy and Michael and Mayor Barrow. Folks, Mayor Ford, when I mentioned to him that I was doing this, he said he would try and call in if he could. So I hope you don't mind if he. Yeah, I was right in the middle of a great answer, Premier. It was one of my best. So.
Well, you can finish off your answer, and then
No. You go ahead. People want to hear from you.
Well, folks, and first of all, thanks for mentioning this to me, Rod, and I just want to say hello to all the chamber up in Richmond Hill, and I have to give a shout out to the mayor. Mayor, you're doing a great job. Thank you for your leadership, as well as Michael and Daisy. We're very fortunate that we have Michael, Daisy, and Mayor, yourself up there. Everyone's working together, being collaborative at all three levels of government. And I just want to mention to the chamber, you know, we've been going through a few bumps, the whole world has, and obviously Canada and Ontario specifically, but I'm confident when we get through this, we're going to light the economy on fire. And Rod, I'm very grateful and fortunate to have Minister of Finance of the caliber of Rod put together an incredible budget, and it focuses on three pillars, and I'm sure you talked about it, Rod, and especially on the recovery side when it comes to businesses. And I always say, yes, I'm an elected official, but make no mistake about it, I'm a business person first, and I look at things. I look at things through numbers. I love measuring. I have experts, health experts around me, and I have a great economic mind as Minister of Finance, Rod. I know Michael and Daisy, both of you, and I'm just confident. I'm confident that with the budget that we put through, and Rod, you created an environment in Ontario to compete. No, we just don't compete against people down the street any longer, folks. We're competing against Michigan, the Ohio's, the North Carolina, so on and so forth. Now, with your budget, Rod, competitive on energy costs through the WSIB premiums that we have reduced, along with the business education tax. I'll let you rattle the rest off, Rod. Correct me if I'm wrong, but since we've been elected, we've given up to $5 billion back in one way or another to companies, and a lot of small and medium-sized companies right across our province, because we're strong believers in creating that environment for companies to expand and prosper and grow, and therefore their employees will grow. And folks, there's many things I've learned since becoming Premier. I spent a lot of time in the private sector at our companies in the U.S. and traveling around, and what I learned, one of many things, is how diversified we are here in Ontario compared to our number one trading partner that we do $400 billion of two-way trade every single year. And I always say the U.S. is, if we're a standalone country, the U.S. is third largest trading partner in the world. And there's no region. I spent a lot of time traveling around 45 states, almost on a weekly basis for 20 years. No one down there is as diverse. No state is as diverse. No one has the skilled trades and IT and AI and mining, forestry, banking, and I could go on, manufacturing, that we do. We're an economic powerhouse. We're smarter, we're better, we have better educated young people coming out of our colleges and universities, and no one can stop us. And I remember, folks, before this pandemic, the toughest challenge all of us had, and I'm including including the chamber as well. We were short back about a year ago. We were short 250,000 people to fill the jobs. And I can assure you, we'll get back to that point, and we will again be economic leader, job creation, economic development anywhere in North America like we were a year ago. So I want to thank everyone for everything you've done over this pandemic, and I can promise you, we're all sticking together, and we will get through this. So again, thank you, and God bless you and your families.
Thank you, Premier. I think Mayor Barrow just might want to say something just before you go there.
Yes, it's wonderful to have you here with us tonight and going through the process of, as we all are, on our businesses and how we can help them and how we can work together at every level to make sure that we can get everybody included and everything. So it's a pleasure to have you here in the city of Toronto, Richmond Hill. I almost said Toronto, geez. Richmond Hill, and we thank you for stopping by, and we're going to spend the rest of the evening with Rod and his great news he has on the budget that he brought out last week. So thank you very much for being a part of our evening.
Well, thanks so much, Mayor, and keep up the great job. You're a great mayor, and we're all working together, and we'll get through this. And if I could ever help you out with anything at all, Mayor, you call me directly, or anyone who's on this line from the chamber. You give myself a call, Rod or Michael or Daisy. By the way, again, we're blessed to have Michael and Daisy up there representing.
You are. They're very, 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 very good for our community too.
That's great, folks. I just have to hop on another call here, but again, I want to thank everyone and stay safe.
Thank you, Premier. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
That's always nice when he wants to do that. So I think that's a great chance to hear from him. He works so hard. I got to tell you, I know Michael and Daisy, we see it ourselves, but he loves the chance to get the message across. So Karen, I was partly through an answer of a question and I'd forgotten what the question was. Can you guys still hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
We
Rod,
do.
you have to, because I think she's frozen.
I am.
So Karen,
Am I frozen?
you're
Yeah,
okay
you were
now.
frozen a few minutes ago.
You're back now.
She may have been frozen again.
Yes, she's frozen again. So Rod, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll send another question your way, Rod. The small business seem to be looking at savings in a couple of areas, including property tax and employee health tax. What else should there be? What else should we be investigating while COVID continues?
Listen, I think the
Am I back?
you are. Yes. Rod jumped in ably there in answering or asking the question. So, well, I think when we think about small business, of course, we're regulations considerably, and we're going to continue to work on that. When we come to restaurants, we've committed to making permanent the ability to have alcohol sales as part of takeaway food delivery. These seem like smaller things, but they're really quite big things and have been very helpful for the restaurant industry. As we go through the challenges of the public health, ups and downs, and I know we'll have some further announcements later in the week on that. We are also committed to, for those areas that are in the more difficult lockdowns, the kind of control level. And you remember now we have a 5 category with colors: green, yellow, orange, red, and gray. Gray is bad, that's lockdown. But red is the control area one. So the same as we did before for the last month, we'll provide support for property taxes. We put $300 million aside to pay that, as well as for electricity. The federal government, I'm very happy to see, has come through. The legislation is now working its way through to have a new rent program. This program will be different than the previous program that isn't tenant driven, not landlord driven. So the last program did support about 64,000 businesses. So a lot of people got support for 6 months on that program, but we heard loud and clear that was a challenge because of the criteria, sometimes because of the size of the program. And I have to say, we worked very hard with the federal government, and they've now put out a program that will be direct to tenants. And also we'll have some different criteria in terms of the size, so that, you know, some large businesses like banquet halls that might have very big rents but weren't eligible will be eligible. So there's a range of those kinds of ongoing supports that we're going to provide, and of course, just the best we can all do is just try to remind each other to shop locally, work with our local businesses. I do want to talk. The Premier talked about that electricity. It is this has been a huge burden on our manufacturing sector and on parts of our commercial sector. In the commercial area, our electricity prices went up 118% over the last 7 years. I mean, that was as a result of I think some misguided approaches the previous government took around some of the windmills and other things that were just, the contracts were set at levels where they were just uncompetitive. And so those continue for the next 19 years, but we're going to wind those down. And in the meantime, we're going to support electricity pricing for those businesses. We need to, and we will now be competitive with the United States, better than the US average, or lower than the US average, but also more importantly, lower than the averages across the Great Lakes states. So lots of supports there. And again, we're always looking for ways to try to support our job creators.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
What are your thoughts on government funding going to a well-funded and profitable company like Ford Motor in light of all other issues where money could be invested, et cetera?
You know, it's a great question, Rod. We are looking very strategically at the places where not only do we need to create the environment, the lower electricity prices, the lower regulations, reducing things like property tax, making sure the infrastructure is there, but where the strategic investments can make the difference. And so when the Ford Oakville opportunity came along, and I have to say we did this very much in partnership with Labor, with Jerry Diaz, head of Unifor. This was an opportunity for Ontario to start to cement itself into the future of car manufacturing by getting 5 different car platforms on the electric vehicle side. So in that case, the investment of just a bit over $180 million, in my view, partnering with the federal government doing the same thing made sense because of 2 things. First of all, it set up a foundation for the future. And secondly, and this is very much the Premier's condition, we want to build the supply chain related to the battery components, the nickel, the cambium, the lithium. Those are all, particularly the nickel in Ontario's nickel producing areas up near Sudbury, is among the best in the world. So we have a very important supply chain. 30% of our exports to the United States, the Premier talked about the importance of exports, 30% are in the automotive area. 8 years from now, might be 5 years from now, might be 10 years from now, but I guarantee you 10 years from now, if you're not manufacturing electric vehicles in this sector, you're not going to be in the automotive business. So we're not just investing to maintain that, which is very important. And now we've seen Fiat as well with their Windsor operations saying they're going to do the same thing. We've seen the GM commitment in Oshawa, although that'll start with trucks. But we're also building that supply chain of the future, which really takes advantage of Ontario's resource wealth. So I think, Rod, you've got to look at these things one at a time. But in the case of this one, I think it made sense.
Thank you. I have a question. The budget talks about funding for rapid testing for COVID-19. What kind of funding are we talking about? And is this something that small businesses might be able to access?
So rapid testing, and you all would have heard the Premier. He was really advocating and pushing for the approval of these. The first rapid tests landed and are now being applied here in Ontario this week. 100,000 tests. There's varieties of these tests. We'll be getting the antigen tests, which are the more even quicker rapid tests that are available. Those are starting next week. So this, I think, is going to be a game changer. And I think you're right. I think for businesses, for travel, when we think about there's versions of the quarantine that can be modified when we're able to move tests very quickly. Right now, those first 100,000 tests are being deployed in some of our remote communities where we have really specific vulnerabilities that we need to take care of in the north, and being deployed in some of the more high need areas, some of the parts of the GTA where we need to be able to move very quickly into certain neighborhoods. But now that the federal government has approved those tests, we have certainly set aside, we set aside $1.4 billion, so lots of funding. And you'll all appreciate this as a business person. The current nose swab test, which I don't know if everybody has had one, but if you haven't, it's not the most fun, but a very effective test, costs about $70 a test. These rapid tests are in the neighborhood of $15 to $30 a test. So as the Minister of Finance, I'm excited about rapid testing for a number of reasons. The idea of deployment into businesses and how that gets deployed is one of the next things on our agenda. First, we have to secure the supply, and we'll make sure that the health uses of it are used first. But I've talked to a number of companies that are quite anxious about or excited about being able to provide that service directly to business for some businesses where that high-speed test would be helpful. So I do think this is going to be a game changer, and I'm got to say pleased that the federal government got them approved. And again, those first tests were deployed yesterday. So great to see it happening.
Thank you. Can SME companies obtain business expansion funding support to expand their business in other provinces or other countries with Canadian government grants and loans? If so, where would we find the regulation, qualifications, and requirements?
So I'd suggest that the federal government does have some programs, the provincial government less so in the direct business subsidy area. I would suggest through Daisy and Michael, we try to, as members, representatives, I do it in Ajax as well, we become a one-stop shop where we're happy to refer people to the federal government programming, which is a bit more robust in that regard. Most of the money right now is being focused by the federal and provincial government on sustaining businesses as opposed to expanding businesses. So most of the programs are really focused there because that's where the greatest need is. But I'm sure Daisy or Michael would be happy to concierge you into some of the, the Federal Business Development Bank has programs particularly for export-based businesses. Again, this is a time when the real true entrepreneurs out there are looking at the opportunity. And I do think that, I'll tell you, I mentioned Jerry Dias, the head of Unifor. I said, Jerry, why, I knew the work we'd been doing in terms of the electricity and things, but why are some of these large companies deciding to be here? Why are they choosing Ontario to locate in when, there's so much made in America and pressure there? And he said to me, Rod, there's a couple of reasons, but one of the most important ones is because right now, as they look out and listen, we're a long way, perhaps, we don't know when the COVID-19 issue will be past us, but when they look at how that's been managed, they like what they see in Ontario. And I said, well, what does that mean? Because that sounds important. He said, well, right now at an auto plant, take Oakville, take Windsor, take Brampton, at an auto plant in Ontario, attendance rates are in the 95% rate. So 95% of the employees are working out. In Tennessee and some of the American jurisdictions, it's lower than 60. So, if you've got to build trucks or you've got to build cars or you've got to build anything, right? Or you've got to serve any customer, you want people to show up. And I don't think the government can take credit for that. We've done our part, but that's really because people in Ontario have responded the way they have. And we'll continue to be flexible and work through this together. But it matters to investors that people show up for work. And so that's a good signal, I think, if you're a business person or an entrepreneur and you're thinking about growing with Ontario as your base, that's the kind of thing that should give you confidence.
Thanks very much. Next question. A lot of parents appreciate the $200 per child payment that will help cover education costs at home. Will we see something similar for college and university students who are forced to attend their classes remotely for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, so not in this budget, and just in case people don't know what you're talking about, I'll just give the details. So earlier in the pandemic, in the first wave, we provided $200 for every child 12 and under, and $250 for special needs children under 21. So, for a family with 2 children, one of whom special needs, this year, that'll be about $1,300 between those 2 payments. And that's going to support people, whether it's the extra technology costs or data costs. We know there's a lot of pressure on parents. For students, we, along with the federal government waived the interest on student loans for the first 6 months of this fiscal year, and we have continued to freeze and hold tuitions in addition to having reduced them going forward. So that's there. In addition to a variety of other supports, $19 million targeted just at mental health related to post-secondary students. We know there's a lot of pressure there, but again, we will continue to listen and provide the dollars where they need to be provided. One of the very unique things about this year is we have a very unusual November budget, and then we're going to have another budget in March. So this gives us the chance to look and see what's necessary then.
I realize this is not your area, but you did say you were willing to comment on COVID-related issues. And this question is, would you care to comment on the government's approach to treating regions as if they are a single COVID hotspot? Businesses in Richmond Hill are tired of facing restrictions because Vaughan has a much higher pandemic illness count. It feels like we're getting punished for our neighbors' bad behavior.
You know, I can tell you, Daisy and Michael and I have been involved in some very, I guess I'll call it heated discussions about how we help manage through the pandemic. Currently, 34 public health regions is the structure that we have in Ontario for health. And so those regions, by and large, align around municipal boundaries. York, being one of them. I'm from Durham. So the Durham region is all one region. And I'll talk about Durham, for example. We have a fairly tightly packed suburban riding in Ajax, but Durham goes all the way up to Clarington and places that are very much different parts of geography. So to date, of course, originally, you will all remember back to April and May, we were treating the province as one big health unit. We were saying whether you were in Kenora or Kingston, we were treating everything the same way. We've broken things down now into the regional areas, and we're working very closely with the different public health units. Public health officers do have the ability within those regions to apply restrictions on a more localized basis. But the new structure that we've set up with these, which is these 5 colors going from green to gray, from least invasive to most invasive, gray, which would be lockdown, which of course we hope we don't have to get back down to. The new system we've set up allows also flexibility for public health officers. And there's one very good example today with Toronto. We moved Toronto into the red area, which is the control area, which is the second most restrictions. But the way the new mechanisms are set up, the public health officer, Dr. Davila, has done even stronger restrictions within Toronto beyond that, and even parts of Toronto, because she believes that's what's necessary. So there is flexibility within this new 5-color system. We're setting this up because we have to plan for the fact that we might be in this for a while. Remember, in either of those red or gray areas, that's where the province and the federal government will also provide additional support for businesses that are affected. We are learning. I certainly will not claim that the system is perfect, but we're doing our very best to try to be adaptable, knowing at the end of the day that although we break up the province into regions, the virus doesn't know borders. It doesn't know the difference between Pickering and Ajax or Vaughan and Richmond Hill. That's why we all have to make sure we listen to the public health guidance and do our very best to keep those levels under control.
Thank you. This question comes from one of our board members. As the economy recovers, can we expect support programs to target those businesses forced to close instead of all businesses with lower revenues?
So we are, I think, looking, as I said, the $300 million program is specifically targeted at regions that were either what was called modified stage 2 or what is now called control or red, to provide supports. And the federal government legislation, which I guess I've had the chance to look at more closely than I suspect any of you had, also follows that same approach. So those are with rent supports. The rent support, for example, accelerates from 65% to 90% for those businesses that have actually been more directly impacted. So we'll continue to look to that. I mean, our objective, this is the worst recession of most of our lifetimes. We know that in recessions, unfortunately, there are casualties from businesses, and that is something that no government with no endless amount of money can stop from happening. But our objective has to be to get everyone to the best of our ability through. And that's why we saw municipalities, extending patios, doing great things on short notice to make things work. That's why, we've done things that, in normal time would have taken years to try to get alcohol delivery as part of restaurant delivery, but we just did it in a matter of days to support our restaurants. So we'll keep looking at the things we can do to support businesses to get them through, and really to try to prepare them for the other side. And of course, like I said at the beginning, the beauty businesses, the gyms, the restaurants, the tourism industries. We know that some, just by the nature of their business, the large events, not too far outside of Richmond Hill, you've got Canada's Wonderland, right? It's a large venue of people. You've got event businesses inside of Richmond Hill where the prospect of having 500 people in one room isn't something that we can all imagine right now happening too soon. So we'll do our best to support those businesses. I know the federal and local governments will as well.
People tend to concentrate on what matters most to them at a given moment when they look at the budget. So the question to you is, what do you consider the single most important element in this new budget?
That's a really good question. I know the most important thing right now is making sure we have money for our healthcare system. And so we do. There is not only the dollars that we've set aside, but the way we've approached budgeting is we've set aside significant contingencies. And right now there's still $2.6 billion left of these are contingencies over and above. And maybe this is the finance geeky answer for me, but I wanted to make sure that there's enough money for whatever comes along. When it was back in March, we didn't know we were going to need $1.1 billion to buy, 900 million gloves, 300 million masks, 50 million sets of equipment, 6 million face shields, but we needed to. And so we'd set aside those contingencies. So in many ways, at the highest level, that flexibility, particularly in the health area, is what gives me the confidence that we're going to have what we need. When we needed to pay our frontline healthcare workers some more, particularly our PSWs, because we were having challenges with those, the individuals, being able to go to work and making a choice, putting themselves and their families at risk, we were able to have $1.1 billion to do that because we set the contingencies aside. The single expenditure that I'm very happy that is there, that hasn't gotten much attention. The issues that have also been coming up around the differential impacts for people in our communities, and the real open and good but tough dialogue we've been having about anti-Black racism in our province and our communities is something that I wanted to see didn't get missed in the context of what we're doing. So one of the things that we've done is double our commitment to the Youth Black Action Fund, which is something that we've now doubled for the next 3 years. That'll be a huge commitment. It's already helping 10,000 people, young Black men and women in our communities. We've doubled down on that because I think that's the sort of thing as well, that equity issue can't get lost. So Karen, I'm really proud that in the context of everything else we were doing, that was an area that we also focused on. I just think there's things that can't wait, and that's one of the things that discussion needs to keep happening, and the resources need to be behind it to help that community.
Thanks. Next question, and our time is we still have a few minutes, so let's see if we can get 2 or 3 more questions in, if you wouldn't mind.
I will keep them short, the answers.
Oh, that was all good. It's all good. Are there any plans to help high technology startups, for example, in the automotive industry, to bring their products to market and keep their innovation in Ontario and Canada?
So this is an area that had a lot of focus before and will continue to have focus. So there are a number of initiatives around support for those kinds of companies, depending on where they're located. But one of the really critical things that we are investing significantly in is building our capacity to promote and preserve intellectual property that's developed here in Ontario. Ontario, we are great at developing technology and IP. We are not great at hanging on to it. And we did a work, Jim Balsillie, who is one of the founders, along with Mike Lazaridis, both of whom I've known for some time, but founders at RIM, Research in Motion. Jim really took the bull by the horns here and designed, with a community, a whole strategy around the preservation of intellectual property. I don't know how many of you have done business internationally. I've had the pleasure of doing it, but if you do business in a place like Taiwan or Israel, or I could pick a number of other countries. One of the very first things that those entrepreneurs do is make sure that they protect their IP. right? And up here, we develop the IP often through public investments in hospitals and universities, but also in our businesses. And then some guy comes along, from the U.S. and and buys the professor who developed it a nice cottage in Muskoka and takes the IP and goes down and builds a $3 billion business, right? So we have a big focus on that. The other thing, I've had a fellow named Waleed Solomon, who is a senior lawyer, longtime friend of mine in Toronto, but I asked him to put a task force together. They're going to be delivering recommendations around the renovation of our capital markets. We need capital markets. There's been a declining number of IPOs. That means fewer businesses will be able to gain access to capital. One of the real advantages, the Premier talked about our diversified economy, the fact that businesses can get dollars, particularly at that earlier stage through public and other things, is part of the growth we have to preserve. So we'll have something coming forward very soon, and likely part of the next budget, looking at what we need to do to make sure our capital markets are at the stage they need to be competitive, so our entrepreneurs can get the dollars they need. If we want to build the next Shopify, if we want to build the next Research in Motion, that all happens because there's money available. And so we're going to do the things we need to do to make sure that happens.
Thanks. Here's a question. Can you comment on the long-term financial impact of COVID-19?
It's not great. It's involving spending at levels for governments that is neither desirable nor sustainable. But it is, I say that in the same sentence, absolutely necessary. We did not inherit from the previous government a province that had been fiscally well managed. We have the largest sub-sovereign debt in the world. And unfortunately, the investments that had been made had not been made in things that generated long-term value in the way that you would invest in assets in a business. But fortunately, we had almost 2 years to start to get that ship righted. And as a result, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, who is independent and operates looking at the federal and provincial governments, said on Friday that Ontario was one of only 4 provinces that's had sustainable finances. And that's reassuring. But we are going to need to be focused, and this is why I'm so focused on recovery. This is why the Premier is so focused on recovery. Coming out of World War II is the only corollary that you can look at where the government and Canada had the kind of debt levels that we are going to collectively have at the end of this. And we had 10 years of unprecedented growth coming out of World War II that helped pay for that. Now, there were certain circumstances after World War II that gave Canada that advantage. So we need to look to new advantages. But we are going to have to use all of our innovation and all of our great entrepreneurial spirit and collective spirit to make sure that we get that engine going again and that economy going again, because the debt levels are significant and necessary. Unfortunately, we'll still do our best, Michael and Daisy and I, to make sure every dollar is well spent, but we're not gonna be trying to save dollars when people's lives are at stake.
4 minutes, please. 4 minutes for the minister, please.
That's the voice of Fatty who comes through on the Ontario logo. So
I didn't actually. So is he saying the clock's running down and we should be speedy? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think he's telling, we got sort of 6 minutes left, and then I think I might be speaking to some other folks.
Gotcha. I'll just say that I worked in radio. I'm good at working to time. So one last question. We'll look to you for a brief but pithy but fabulous answer. And that is for the businesses who have held on by their fingernails through the first wave of COVID. What's your advice for the next round?
Listen, first of all, the efforts of our small businesses in particular have been nothing short of heroic when you've seen what they've done to keep employees safe, to keep their customers safe. I believe that the approach that we're taking from a public health perspective is different and evolved, in that now it is meant to try to appreciate and understand that keeping businesses open, keeping people out of social isolation, keeping people's mental health and ability to interact with people is important, and is important, of course, that we control the virus. So I ask you, please make sure and talk to Michael, talk to Daisy. We want to make sure that all the programs and supports that we have available, there's one I didn't mention, $1,000 worth of PPE for any small business, again, all available through a simple site that goes active next week. Checks will flow by the end of the month. Please, hang in there. It is a difficult time. I've run a business. I've had to meet a payroll. I've had my house mortgage to pay for that business. And so I know how it feels when you're the one who's carrying that load. But we are there to support you. We are going to do what it takes to get this province through. And that means trying to get you through as well. So please reach out and let us know what we can do to support you. And please make sure you're taking advantage of what is there to help. And, please, all of the rest of us, I know we're all business people on the phone here and on this call and on this thing, but please, encourage our neighbors and friends to shop local, because that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Our favorite message. I'm going to ask our other Rod Johnson, Chair of our Board of Directors, to just say a word or two to wrap up.
Yes, thank you, Karen. I'd like to thank all our members, of course, who have joined us this evening. We hope that you found this information session meaningful. Certainly access and hearing from our different levels of government, but specifically the provincial government today is great. Of course, our local MPPs, Parsa and why we appreciate your efforts in bringing your guest, the Minister of Finance, today. So thank you, Rod Phillips, for your time and your engagement, and also for bringing a guest as well. The Premier Ford was a nice surprise. It was nice to hear from all of you. So again, on behalf of all our members and the board of Richmond Hill Board of Trade, we thank you all for your time.
Thank you all. If there are follow-up questions, and if you want to funnel them through us, we'll get them to Daisy and Michael's offices, or you can, of course, contact them directly. Thank you again, Minister Phillips. This has been educational and a lot of fun. Have a good, safe evening, everyone. We hope to see you in person someday really soon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. Stay safe.
All the best,
Yep.
Rod. All the very best.
Yeah, stay